Welcome back to the channel. I'm Eric Austin, and today's video was something that was requested in my previous video, how a suit should fit and why, which I'll link in the description below, as well as some of my other videos prior to that, and that is to discuss the topic of dress shirts. Now, I think we've all had situations where we've purchased a dress shirt and it just was simply ill-fitting. The sleeves maybe were too long or too short, the body of the shirt was a bit too loose and blousy, and quite honestly, nothing fit well at all. So today I'm going to discuss not only how a shirt should properly fit, but also talk about a few different design options that you can always consider when purchasing your dress shirts. So starting with the collar of the shirt. Now this is something that's extremely important, and when purchasing off the rack, a lot of the times dress shirts will come in a standard collar and sleeve length. So for example, you might have a 16.5 neck size with a 33-34 sleeve length. That's very common. Now, of course, if you're purchasing a custom shirt, we can adjust all of these different intricacies and different portions of a dress shirt separately. Starting with the collar, you want to make sure that you can comfortably fit 1 to 2 fingers in the neckband. Now, you do have situations where I'll be doing a fitting and a guy's like, hey, I can fit 1 to 2 fingers, but it still feels a little bit too tight. That's totally fine. We can loosen it up just a little bit, but keep in mind, you don't want the neckband to be too loose because this kind of creates an unsightly look, makes it just simply look like the shirt is too big for you. So you want to make sure that it's snug enough, not choking you, but snug enough to where it doesn't have that large gap in between your skin and the neckband, but still comfortable to where you could fit a finger or two in between. Next, speaking on the different types of collars. So I'll take myself as an example. The last few years, I've really been leaning more towards a longer, more narrow pointed collar. Now, let me say this is all preference, but the reason I was kind of leaning in that direction was for the last few years, I kind of just wanted a more serious, I guess you could say, stoic look. And in my opinion, the more narrow, longer points typically look a little bit more serious when compared to a cutaway or a widespread collar. It gives a bit more of a youthful appearance. Now, a rule of thumb to always remember when looking at different collar options, whenever you are trying to decide, you want to keep in mind the shape of your face. So for example, if you have a more narrow face, most of the time you want to go with a collar that's a bit more on the wide side. And if you have a wider face, you typically want to go with a collar that's a bit more narrow. Now, again, this is all preference, but in my opinion, a wider collar looks a little bit more youthful, and a narrow collar gives a little bit more of a serious undertone. Now, moving on to the placket, or I'll also say the chest portion of the shirt. You always want to make sure when it comes to the fit that when you're relaxed, either standing or sitting, that the shirt just falls naturally. Whenever you have, similar with a suit, a shirt that is too small or too tight on the chest region, you will have a situation where the buttons are pulling and it creates tension. Again, similar to a suit jacket, if the chest is too small, you'll have a puckering or bowing that's occurring on the chest. It's the same with shirts. If the chest is too tight or too small, those buttons begin to pull. In most cases, this means you simply want to size up. Now, when it comes to the design options on the shirt, there are a few that I will touch on in this video. There are many different placket options when it comes to dress shirts, but I'd say the 4 most common, number 1 would be a standard shirt placket, which is essentially where you have a shirt that has a placket that is folded and stitched on both sides, creating a double seam on either side of the buttons. I say this is probably the most common style of shirt, especially when purchasing off the rack. But for me personally, I actually never wear this style of shirt. I prefer a no placket, or otherwise known as a French placket, which is what I have on today, which essentially is just a very clean finish. There's no double stitching on either side of the button. For me, again, it just creates more of a clean look as opposed to a traditional placket shirt, which gives more of a business, or you could say dressy look. The third style of placket would be something that you usually would see on a tuxedo shirt, and that would be what's called a hidden button placket. Of course, this is where there is a piece of material or fabric that is folded over top of the buttons and gives the illusion that they are hidden, which I guess they are hidden. But once again, this is something that you'll see on usually a tuxedo shirt. You do see it sometimes when gentlemen are just wearing a traditional necktie, but I usually only recommend this style when you're wearing a tuxedo. Next up, let's talk about the different cuff options. So 9 times out of 10, I wear what's called a barrel cuff, or a button cuff essentially. This is going to be the most common style next to French cuff, which obviously is where you can throw in cufflinks. Now, there are many different options. The most common I would say would be a button cuff, which is what I have on today once again. So I typically will do a 2-button adjustable cuff. Sometimes you'll see gentlemen who are wearing a 3-button cuff, which is where the buttons are vertically placed on the cuff. And then of course you have French cuff, which is where you have a fabric that is fold it back, and then of course you can insert cufflinks. Most of the time you'll see French cuffs on tuxedos. You can obviously wear them with a classic suit as well. Usually I'd say similar to that of a longer, narrow pointed collar. French cuffs typically give a bit more of a serious kind of formal look to the suit. I like to wear French cuffs a lot if I'm doing a three-piece, or of course if I'm wearing a tuxedo as well. Next up, let's discuss something that is quite often overlooked by a lot of gentlemen, and that is the length of your dress shirt. You always want the length of the shirt, in my opinion, to be, I'd say, a little bit longer. And the reason for that is, number one, as you're going throughout your day, you never want a situation where you're kind of bending or reaching for something and the dress shirt just simply comes untucked out of your trousers. The second reason would be a lot of gentlemen dry clean their dress shirts, and dress shirts are just something that quite honestly shrink a lot. And if your dress shirt is too short to begin with, or I'd say right at that perfect length, you never want to dry clean it and then it comes back and it is too short. So I always recommend you have a dress shirt that's, in my opinion, a little bit on the longer side. It will be at a length to where even if it does shrink a little bit, it'll still be comfortable. Now, the fourth style of placket that I wanted to talk about would be a popover placket. Now, popovers are going to be, and I might actually do a separate video on this, but these are definitely going to be much more of a casual style of shirt. You usually will see them in a 3, 4, or 5 button variation. And essentially all that means is the placket of the shirt stops about halfway down. And this is something that you would never wear a tie with because it is much more of a casual look. You want that placket to show. And I think this looks incredible on casual shirts, specifically short sleeve shirts. It's something that I wear quite often during the summertime, and again, I think it just looks excellent on casual shirts. In conclusion, you have your placket shirt, no placket, hidden button placket, and popover placket. Now, I do want to backtrack just a little bit and work my way back up the shirt. So moving back into the body of the shirt, I know I touched on the placket. The same rules apply for the body of the shirt. You never want those buttons to be pulling. That means that it's too tight. On the inverse, one thing that happens a lot is something that I do on my shirts also. Gentlemen who don't really have a stomach, but when the shirt's tucked in, it blouses or parachutes out the back of the shirt. We can do what we call darting the shirt. I recommend, honestly, for most guys that they dart the shirt. This allows, once again, the shirt to kind of contour, and it doesn't allow for that parachuting effect that most guys hate. When a shirt is darted, essentially the fabric is stitched back inwards, and again, it contours to your back, gives much more of a form-fitting appearance, and just has much more of a clean look. Now, darting is something that you can do post-production. You can do to dress shirts that you already own, and it is an extremely inexpensive alteration. Most darts typically range between $8 and at most $15. Getting your shirt darted is an easy fix and is something that I would highly recommend for most gentlemen. Now, going back to the collar of the shirt. The collar of the shirt is going to be something when you're purchasing a custom shirt that we can adjust, meaning we can adjust the collar band height as well as the point length. I really love a higher collar, especially when it's a shirt such as a popover where I'm not wearing it with a tie. Whenever you don't have the help of that top button, you always want a dress shirt that stands up well without being buttoned. So essentially, if we make that collar band higher, you allow more room for the collar to stand up on its own. And quite honestly, we all hate when the collar falls down underneath the lapel of the jacket. It doesn't look good. It looks like the collar needs a little bit of help. And one way to adjust that, especially if you're purchasing a custom shirt, is for us to simply increase the collar band height. Another thing I love to do is to make the collar point a little bit longer. We've all seen situations where there's that gap in between the collar point and the lapel of the jacket. A lot of the times, this can mean many things, but a lot of times this means that the collar point is simply too short. One thing that I've noticed with off-the-rack shirts, I'll just be honest, especially on dress shirts that are maybe a little bit on the cheaper side or inexpensive side, is collars that are too short. A lot of brands that are more in the fast fashion space, they oftentimes sell dress shirts that just have collars that are just too short, and you get that weird and unsightly gap in between the collar and the lapel. One thing, once again, that I love to do on custom shirts is make that collar a little bit longer. That way you never have to worry about that gap. In conclusion, I hope this video serves as a bit of a guide when purchasing your next dress shirt. Please make sure that you let me know down in the comments if you have any more questions. If you are interested in purchasing a custom dress shirt, please make sure to come see us. I have the address down below in the description, as with all the videos. We reached our 500 subscriber goal, so the next goal would definitely be 1,000 subscribers. So please make sure that you're still commenting, liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel. It means a lot more than you know. And as always, I will see you all next time. Bye.